Late Night Thoughts, a special spin-off series, mini segment, audio blog, journal, podcast, talk show, spin-off series of the almost daily ZenCast, hosted by yours truly, the incorrigible Mr. Zeppo. Late Night Thoughts, real world observations about those deep, dark things that keep me up at night. Up late at night. Even though this just happened to me today in the middle of broad daylight, 4:45 p.m., it's the kind of thing I think and obsess about, and think about quite often in the middle of the night, friends. So thank you for joining me. Life, four-way street intersections, and low-grade addictions to the internet and everything. How all these things, in theory and in potentia, collided to converge into a series of events that was nearly life-threatening in my actual real-life lived experience on so many occasions, it is worth commenting on. That's today's episode of Late Night Thoughts with yours truly, the incorrigible Mr. Zeppo. And you've been listening to Recalibrating Perfect Take 5 to Take Performance, a mid-tempo remix live audio asset digital engineering feat of Dansothonic Discotheque Synthetica, created by DJ Z and curated by your truly. Walking down the street, and this is sort of open air, big suburban, urbanized suburbia in the SoCal region. There's a place I go to sometimes as often as 3 times a day or more, or less. Sometimes just the once a day or twice a day to get my coffee. To get to, I must cross a standard multiple lane, 4-way, red light, green light, crosswalk protected intersection. And on now, just in the 5 or so years that I've lived in this particular habitation, has this happened to me so many times I've lost count. It's in the more than 2 dozen times. In the times that I have lived in other places, locales, situations, cities, and or traveled to, visited and worked, there's, urban and suburban and super mecha champion level, huge mecha urban city situations. I'm kidding about that, but, sci-fi seed planting. At some point or another, I've encountered the process of having the right of way, having the legal, and I should call it legally binding, green crosswalk man light protected right of way in a crosswalk, and have come perilously close to the brink of being, or having might have been, in the wrong physical position at the wrong cosmological time, and therefore probably suffering the pain and agony of being struck by a very huge car being driven by either callous and impatient driver, or a absent-minded and distracted driver, or some combination therein. This has happened to me a lot in my life since I began walking to places on streets with crosswalks. And I have, for reasons neither that I have never really judged. I've done that quite a bit since I can remember. And it's also happened to me in the presence of walking to and from places whilst, being held by the hand, or, in a conveyance of some form, with my parents, and having them in tow. Oh, I totally constructed that sentence almost backwards. With my parents having me in tow. There you go. I have literally been breezed by a not quite speeding, suburban-sized, not a soccer mom, minivan-sized, manly car of some kind or another, that I might have touched it if I just reached out, or had my hands been in the other end of the swing potential as I walked into the crosswalk, and had someone either yank me back, touch me on the shoulder lightly, say something from behind, or I just wasn't there yet, and the car successfully drove past me in that movie magic kind of way of like, wow, wasn't they that narrowly avoided? My life on the line, in the hands of fate, uncertainty, the actual cosmological mechanics of probability waveform function, quantum mechanics, and the skill and or grace of the other person involved, which is always the driver. I remember one time I was walking to a luncheon place, like a meat sandwich shop. I don't remember if it was local, if it was a chain shop, right by a theater that I was doing a show at. Now, mind you, that was true, something I did on a every day that I worked kind of basis for over 20 some odd years in the theater industry, in the live stage performance industry, before the pandemic struck me down and made it next to impossible to re-engage in that sort of work anymore, for more reasons than I care to get into, a healthy portion of which are kind of my own fault, sort of my own dumb choices along the way. Not the least of which is that I picked a car I could actually get with my insurance settlement when I got rear-ended by a drunk driver the last time I was at a really great gig that I was working very successfully. And instead of hiring a lawyer and suing his ass, because I was feeling very full of the Christ-like spirit, being forgiving, I just said, I'll see what I can pull off with this insurance, and I'll try to get it. And I got a golf cart dressed up as a real car and I don't mean that with disrespect, it just can't do the commute as robustly as I wish it could without me paying for it in some way that would be totally tactologically detrimental to me continuing to do the job in a sustainable fashion. Because the recharge rate and the situations around the recharge make it so that I would, no matter what, I would always have to recharge twice a day. Once after having gotten there, and to successfully do that, I would have to either get to the work location, whether it was in Long Beach or in Costa Mesa or in out in the desert places where there's theaters, or in the San Bernardino and Riverside area where there are one or two big regional theaters that I could be doing gigs at, etc., or in Los Angeles where I could be doing, I would have to get to that gig 2.5 hours early because I would be on red line, unable to find where I'm getting to. So I need to get there 2.5 hours or somewhere nearby 2.5 hours early to charge the car back up to then be able to get there, park, work the gig. And then I would still have to top up recharging. And the reason I say 2.5 hours early, get there, is because it takes at a fast charging public station a convenient 2.5 hours to fully charge this little e-car city car that I got. Because it was designed and it operates envisioned driving around in a big metropolis town where everything is relatively close to you. And even by Southern California standards, you know, they're thinking like, oh, someone who lives and commutes into downtown Riverside, for example. Like, theoretically, if I worked at one of the 1.5 big theaters that exist in downtown Riverside, and I lived less than 25-mile radius away, which right now I think I'm a couple of miles shy outside of that range, but to say the least, I could drive there and back and safely charge just overnight at home with this vehicle, right? That's the way it was made. That's the way it was envisioned. Local urban living. Like, you're not... on a good day with a gas car with high fuel efficiency, which is what I had before I got rear-ended, it could take me as much as 3 hours to get to work in terms of getting there super early, in time to deal with parking and other things, and get food and get a coffee and sit and relax and do the same thing before going to work, which is give yourself a minimum of like a 20-minute window to like chill, right? And deal with the arrival, whether it was Laguna Beach, San Diego, LA, because I would work anywhere that I could get work at. And so that could range. Imagine doing a show in San Diego and living somewhere in the Inland Empire or on the edge of the Inland Empire in the northern fringes in Orange County, or, you know, around those parts, give or take 20 miles in either direction, because I moved a lot. So this little e-car, I thought I was at a steady gig that was just far enough away, and I recently moved a little bit closer, but rent too damn high near those theaters. I could not live walking distance to any theater that I want, because none of the work that I could get at the theater, including basic acting jobs, could afford to pay the rent at anything walking distance. And I'm talking about big regional theaters that do big full-time schedules, full-time all the time. Unless I was the manager of a department, or maybe first chair in an office department gig. You had to live really far. You have to live really far away in the boondocks where rent is cheaper, and it by no means is cheap. Okay, so intersections are huge. This is what I wanted to talk about today before I go scrambling. I nearly almost might have gotten killed today. In a probability waveform function matrix of all the lives of that's exactly what happened. And I have been in narrow, if I'd just been 5 heartbeats away, ahead of that car, I would have been in its path, under it, bouncing up over it. I don't know which. And that has happened so many times in my life. And let me tell you, I am not a jaywalker, by tradition. Unless I'm in like a super, in New York, in Mexico City, and cities of that size and caliber, yeah, I'll cross in the middle of the street. I don't give a fuck. And if that's jaywalking, yes. I'm in the middle of the block, not in the middle of the street. I've never, unless it's designed to have a diagonal crosswalk, I've never diagonally shot across the street in between when you shouldn't have. Because you will get pinged by someone not paying attention and just wreck your knees or die. You know what I mean? But I'm not a bootlicker. I'm not a statist by any stretch of the imagination. I'm a surrealist. This is a living organism universe, and everything is a living organism platform, and there's life inside of us that's having some of the same dilemmas we are. And it's not about legislating other people's behavior. It's about transcending through internal spiritual mechanisms that everyone's sort of like a hard pill to swallow, not quite ready to deal with. But I digress. Almost dying and being able to imagine and or sense and or dare I argue. Here's why I'm making an episode about it, because I had that moment today. Literally, and it's tangible, you can't argue me this out of this. I felt it. And I wasn't on any crazy mind-altering substances. I hadn't bought my coffee yet. Boom. If I was playing in front of a large studio and or like stand-up comedy audience, I think that would have gotten a pretty good laugh. Especially if it wasn't like a cold open kind of moment. But, no, thinking about it again, reverse that. Especially if it was a cold open kind of moment. Can you imagine being introduced? And now, ladies and gentlemen, the comedy stylings of the incorrigible Mr. Zeppo. Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Oh my God, I'm so glad to be here. No, literally, I could have almost just died. My most immediate parallel universe self just did. Can we have a moment of silence? Struck by a car, walking on his way to this gig. Something like that. And the joke I just said a hot minute ago, which I now completely can't remember, but that's why I do these recordings, because then I go back and try to transcribe them. Dear Lord above, please, oh please, let's pray to Lord the Jesuses, the trifecta of Jesus, oldie time Jesus, and righteous, rippling bod, hot Jesus, and no weird, inappropriate associations, baby Jesus, and the actual Jesus, which looks nothing like the previous ones referenced, and the transcendental holographic manifold open heart Jesus, and his many minions that we might call the gremlins of the mechaverse, of the holographic universe. Please, oh please, bring this bombshell idea to everyone at Sprecher.com, especially the people that know me personally as an account holder. They should offer free text transcription dumps straight from inside the app. You don't have to do anything else. You don't have to click anything else. You don't have to register or sign up for any other app. Just, I posted it and it went out, and then I got an email with a editable text attachment. Done. That shouldn't be that hard. They have the technology. They have the technology and the technologists and the budget to do it. Amen. Feature request, prayer time. That's an actual feature of the show. We do that every once in a while. A little bit more when we're podcasting about gaming, video game content, which we haven't done that much. And I need to sort of reinvigorate and redeploy the incorrigible Mr. Zeppo's video game corner. Another thing that keeps me up late at night. When am I going to really reboot the podcast so it is all the things that I want it to be? I'm like shambling through one half of a new redeployment of the podcast product. And it's been weird and strange because we hit a technical hiccup, and we can ramble about that on a programming note episode later on. So tune in for that. But my main primary product line, one of the earliest things I brought to Sprecher platform and have been posting and has been sitting on their servers the longest, when I spun it off, quote unquote, as I call it, to another episode container, as they call it, when I took episodes sitting on my account of mine that have been there forever and bundled them into a new episode, into a new podcast. Not a new podcast, but because I've had it before as a separate podcast. There's a whole backstory there, friends. But pins on the cork word. I've already talked about it. I don't want to bore you with it now. You'll come full circle one day and be like, wow. Wild. It all makes sense now. But I digress. that show, I wanted, as you may know, be noting, if you go to Sprecher.com/user/Mr. Zeppo, you'll see that there's a collection of podcast shows there. This content's been on the Sprecher servers forever. I know it's in compliance with their thing because we went through a compliance review process, and I say we, I mean independently. Sprecher updated their terms of service a while back when I had myself just reorganized the podcast. I had it on multiple pages with multiple themes, and someone talked me into integrating it into one single stream, which at the time wasn't a bad idea. But they didn't understand my idea, which was to have a central pillar stream, the Almost Daily ZenCast, and have the shows drop there originally and chill there, and then twice a year get pushed out into the other containers so that they can also attract new listeners by theme, but then also have spent time. Anyways, we're now doing it. Suffice it to say, it's been a long haul. And Good Morning Trumptopia, one of the original segments of the Almost Daily ZenCast, got flagged for being in violation of terms of service, which was not true. I challenged it. We got it back. I prayed to the gremlins of the interwebs, including Baby Jesus and the Yahweh and the Demiurge and all the other beings of the consciousness, mind fractal things that you could call the divine. And I asked them, please, give me my podcast back so it can be its own thing and so that it can go viral. And I can work from home doing the podcast. That's a thought that keeps me up late at night. But I digress, friends. Back to the original thing. Oh, is that DJ Zed? Is that DJ Zed trying to play me out? Oh, I suppose so. 22 minutes and 22 seconds in. Well, I called that a little early. Hold on a second. We're going to actually wait for it because I want 22 in 3, 2, 1. Okay, I'll take it, DJ Zed. We gotta back out. Whatever we talked about earlier, that's what was driving me nuts. Oh, right. There were so many other things I wanted to drop. We're gonna go longer. So it's harrowing, right? I experienced. Hold on, DJ Zed. We're gonna drop you to conversational volume level. I experienced quite literally. Not a near-death experience in the traditional sense, although technically, arguably, I think I have had one of those too, but that was a long time ago in a separate story that I've sort of talked about in the podcast before. You gotta dig deep into the playlist for that. I'll do a really good, proper multi-part series about that whole story in the not-too-distant future too, because it's worth retelling. And it's an event that I personally can neither confirm nor deny for reasons that it's impossible. And it has its caveats. But literally, in all of these multiple, I don't know if we reach hundreds of times. I know it's several dozen just in the 5.5, 6 years that I've lived where I live now, which is none of your business where I live. It's relevant to the podcast or, the stories and the ideas and the public discourse that we're having. And everywhere else, like I said, anytime I've ever been a pedestrian, mind you, also a driver, someone has almost killed me with their car, violating the law, going when they aren't supposed to be going, in a direction they're not supposed to go, at a time when they should have known better than to try to do it. And I don't know about you guys, friends, but in those moments, I have to varying degrees or another, and I will also be spinning this into art by fictionalizing a little bit and turning it into a comic book, turning it into a thing that happens in the book series to other people besides myself. I have felt the thinness of the actual multiversal aspect of our branching personal, not the universal one, not the collective classic one for the planet, but for my own individual self. I have felt my other selves near me in some way that's impossible to describe because They are exactly where I am. This phenomena is something that I used to call deja vu. It happens in quiet, subtle times too, when I get really like tranced out in my inner experience while simultaneously watching the external world and letting it just be instead of trying to analyze it and break it down and take it apart with intellectual activity in my mind. But, you know, in a Zen contemplative place, I have felt the multiple like hallway of mirrors feeling of going everywhere in me, around me, through me, and in exact proximity, doing the exact same thing I am doing, just not in a tangible place I could turn around and look, because we can't otherwise coexist in the exact same place, right? Two objects cannot inhabit the same position in traditional Newtonian physics. In quantum mechanical bifurcated timeline physics, they do, because they're superimposed. And I don't know if I'm misappropriating and misusing an actual technical term from the sciences, because I know there's a thing called superposition, and I don't mean to misuse it. But to me, my understanding of this phenomena that I misnomered early in life and called it deja vu, it's like seeing, imagine you filmed multiple alternate takes of a very simple moment. I'm sitting in meditation, then I get up, and either I walk to the window and open it and look outside, or I walk to the door and open it and step outside and leave the door open, or I stay sitting there meditating. Keep it a simple example. And not from my physical outer proximity place, but from an internal, behind my mind's eye place, the observer of the active observation place, have a meta-observed, especially in heightened moments of meditation, or I fell into a Zen place, or near death because of cars, or I was purposefully exploring the mental, like, how do I Zen out and dilate my headspace so that I can access this experiments in a weird, not tangible, but like hallucinatory way. I see the fractal holographic iterations of interestingly meaningful deviations. Not dumb ones like, in that universe, I'm wearing a blue suit instead of a Kaz jeans and cowboy boots thing. No. But like in a more important archetypical sense, like in that one, me and probably several sub-variant subsets of alternate, but hits the same place of death point. They all die. That timeline truncation point is right there. In another universe, in another foamy cloud of conch shell, innerly recursive, holographic overlaying. Some movies have shown, you know, there's a character in the MCU that sort of lives this. That girl in the second Ant-Man movie, which is funny. I just watched Quantumania yesterday. I'm processing everything, and I want to sit up. I watched it late at night, exhausted from a marathon gaming weekend, and unable to analytically assess it. I'm going to watch it again soon and drop a totally irrelevant media review episode about it. Maybe today, maybe tomorrow. But I just wanted to testify and testimony about that. I was also thinking about jamming about the thoughts and things that I had a conversation with at the convenience shop that I went to engage in, you know, global commerce. But I'll save that for some other time too. I think I've rambled on long enough. I attest to you that that's a real life phenomena, and that I'm also going to write about it in fictional ways in the Zeppoverse. And I've already laid the groundwork sort of hinting at it. So I don't want you to confuse or conflate. I testify in testimony to you here in this episode. Late Night Talks is about being really real and sharing you my really real thoughts. I think that's significant, and I'm not trying to brag. I'm trying to say to you, I think we all have those things going on with us. And and mind you, I'm a firm, and I hate the term believer, because people believe in different ways, and people believe in different functional, structural ways, and I don't want to get into that discussion. I think there's a difference between knowing. I'm a firm, confirmed knower that the mind works in its own holographic, fractally recursive way. It's interpreting the raw algorithmic data of energy out there in the universe and interpreting it. And as the really awesome scientists in Nova's episode 9 of season 50, and some would have criticisms and disparagements and weaponized false accusations to claim against such a show. But I challenge even them to go watch it and think about it and cross-reference the statements made by actual well-intentioned scientists and check it out. But the mind is a holographic probability interpreter. It's interpreting the probability waveform foam matrix that is unfolding before us, which and this is not what they said. I'm saying if you watch that and then you also observe phenomena in your own life, like the kind I'm testifying about and telling you this really happens to me, and then you do a meta-analysis of other studies and cosmological theories, and then zoom out and go, oh, what if we sort of merged all the things that make sense, excluded all the things, and set aside the things we don't know, don't worry about the things we don't have answers to, and just assess the things that can be confirmed and measured, even if they're really weird. Like, there's some really weird experiments. Go watch episode 9, season 50 of Nova. I think it's Nova. I posted it on my social media somewhere. You can catch it up. If you want to be friends with me on social media, it is solo.do/Mr. Zeppo. And on that note, I'm going to say farewell and fair gaming in life and in video games to you. Keep in mind, I'm a multi-platform content creator, theoretically experimenting with my own convoluted process for creating a fan base, a culture for a weird intellectual property of multiple intellectual properties known as the Zeppoverse et al., which y'all can't steal from. Whether it's the podcast, whether it's weird commentary that I say in the live stream, whether it's stuff that's posted on social media, whether it's all my honest assessment about the real world that I will also use to write about a fictionalized world with many worlds in it. So keep that in mind as you give yourself a self-guided tour of the Zeppoverse. Join me on a journey backwards, forwards, sideways through time, real-world history, and my own weird self-expression form of art making in podcast form, in audiovisual mini-reel form coming soon, and in live stream, gaming, jam, public discourse, storytelling, art form. Until next time, friends, I bid you a fond farewell and many blessings and namaste to you. And for funsies, I'm going to play the ADZ outro, even though this is technically late night thoughts. I can't remember where and or what I called the track that I was using as late night thoughts standard in and out. So I'll have to go see if I can verify that. As always, thank you for watching and or listening. Ciao for now. And that is what I've got to say about that. As always, thank you kindly for listening. This has been the Almost Daily ZenCast with your humble host, the incorrigible Mr. Zeppo. Until next time, may peace, love, and grooviness blossom in your heart. That shit is really hard sometimes. Whoo-wee. All right, friends. Here's a deep dive end of podcast top secret post-show kicker. The Matrix is real. It's just not what most people think it is. Let me say that again. The Matrix is real. It's just not what most people think it is, especially if they think it's a simulation in a computer built, a computer box built by some bigger, larger other race. Although that is possible. And even if you were a totally false sim with no human body and no soul, if you think you're alive, and first of all, why would you vote for that? If you were voting, imagine this, friends, because this is what to the best of my understanding, the universe is a living holographic fractal cognition, self-recursive meta echo chamber hallway of mirrors machine of manifesting all probable, possible, potential outcomes of human lived experience, of personhood lived experience. If we took away all the biases of the human species about what is and is not a human, right? Let's just call it personhood, life. All life is striving towards personhood because all life is a vessel for the one holographic singularity, which is also sort of like a infinite whirlwind of many singularities, reaching out and in and down, and also sort of in a quantum mania universe sort of shape. That map, that holographic map that I totally forgot what the name of the daughter that she builds. It's not too terribly far off, but there's so much more to talk about. Stay tuned for the totally irrelevant media review. It's been that series has been sort of on back burner, sort of hiatus, but Quantum Mania is my kickoff. We're bringing that show back online. Okay, so the universe is a living holographic manifestation organism. It is driven by a singularity of singularities of consciousness. That consciousness, the all caps consciousness, is what you call God, but it's not a person, it's not a judge, and it's not going to punish you and send you to hell. It is you without being the, trifecta, triumvirate, branching, fractally unfolding spiral arm of your journey from the singularity to becoming the multiple yous in your universe of experience as you. Your body avatar is one of an infinitude of body avatars of you, the person, the personality, right? Not very far off from the way it's in the comics and the movies and stuff. And I'm not saying so because I knew this to be so long before I encountered it in pop cultural media. And we'll talk about that more in some other episode. Pins on the corkboard. If you know, you know. If you don't know, you don't know. If you want to find out what pins on the corkboard means, stay tuned and drop into more episodes